And thank you for joining us today. With me is Richard Fields in the middle and John Cameron down on the other end. Well, gentlemen, this
Hello.
airs on Christmas Day, and Congress, in their ways, issued a Christmas present of sorts to us here down here in the lowly proletariat, I guess shall we say. The $900 billion stimulus was passed. $600 stimulus checks per person, some unemployment extensions, which I suppose is helpful. Finally, it would have been more helpful 3 months ago, but I suppose if you're going to do it. So anyway, what do you guys think about this whole mess?
Let's do the arithmetic on this. I actually did the arithmetic, and it's a $900 billion program. That means that the government is spending $2,700 or something like that for each and every taxpayer. $2,700 is what it's
country.
Individual. I'm sorry, every individual. And if you want to count taxpayers, it would be probably about double that.
Yeah.
So for every individual is costing every individual is $2,700, and you're getting $900 back, plus maybe if you're unemployed, a few weeks of unemployment compensation.
Mm-hmm.
I somehow or another don't understand how that is a Christmas present, unless you want to think of us giving a Christmas present to the federal government, which of course we do every year and have been since 1913.
Well, you're looking at this all wrong, Richard. It's a Christmas present for future generations. They get this present called debt.
Yeah.
And if debt wasn't wonderful, we wouldn't have what, $27 trillion worth of it. So more must.
Yeah, that's on budget, and then 100 to 200 trillion if you want to look at the off budget. Why, you ask? Can they take $2,700 from us and give us $900 back and call it a good deal? Well, of the 900 trillion, 284 billion. I'm sorry, 900 billion. 284 billion goes to businesses. Pure and simple. Now we're talking mostly zombie businesses and the kinds of businesses who are instrumental in keeping the, shall we say, if we want to be conspiracy theorist about it, the deep state alive and well. I'm talking about nonprofits, the think tanks that are basically revolving doors for personnel, depending on whether Democrats or Republicans are in power, newspapers, television stations, radio stations, movie theaters, and live theaters and other entertainment venues. So these are the kinds of businesses that absolutely are necessary to keep the government is good narrative alive. They're buying off the media, pure and simple. Plus another $82 billion going to colleges and schools to make sure that the youth are properly instructed as to the benevolence of Uncle Sam.
Yeah, and I'm surprised there's not a package in there. It's probably hidden because a lot of publishing houses are independent still, or are they owned by multinational conglomerates?
Well, I mean, Fox owns the publishing house. Most of them are probably, there might be a few independents left, but most of them are owned by large conglomerates, I would suspect.
It looks like Richard froze a little bit there.
Yeah, well, we did see this weekend where Tom Cruise, I guess, threw a cow because someone on his set weren't following protocols exactly. But of course, why are you out there making a movie? Like, your movie is essential, but some guy working at the bar or some waitress who works at a bar that's now closed down, her job isn't essential, but Tom Cruise out making his Running Man movie, because he's always running in a movie, is somehow essential.
Well.
He looks good running. Hey, you got to give him that. But that making movies and commercials and these things, that's essential. But the poor schlep who's got to go trying to make his ends meet, their job doesn't count, and they get some $300 a week in unemployment benefit after they've been unemployed because governors have shut their businesses down. And
if you make more than $75,000, which is not a whole lot of money these days, you get nothing. So the whole thing.
How much is it for a married couple?
I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
who cares? You know, if you make any significant amount of money, you're paying only, and you're getting nothing.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's the same old story. The government breaks the economy by shutting it down unnecessarily and counterproductively, and then hands you a you know, breaks your leg, hands you a crutch, and says, "Hey, look at how nice we are."
Breaks your leg, hands you a crutch. I like that. That's a good metaphor. That has
I
some nice
borrowed that. I
visualization.
borrowed that from Joe Jorgensen, who borrowed it from Harry Brown.
No, no. Well,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good spot to kind of end this discussion on that, because we're going to pay for this $900 billion for a long time. So it's not, this is a, you know, a stimulus based upon future economic growth. So it's not like it's free money. And the government broke down. It's not the pandemic. The media keeps calling this the, you know,
Call
the
it the
pandemic issue.
panic-demic. Call it the panic-demic.
But
Let's call
yeah,
it what it is.
the government panicked, and so now we all have to pay the economic price, and now they're going to pat themselves on the back because they came and rescued us from their issues. It's a mess. But as we talk about a mess, you brought up teens and schools in there. We're going to go ahead and skip down to the bottom of our page here. And school choice, there was a study out recently that school choice reduces teen suicides. And right now, with suicides spiking, and I think I just read a story out of San Francisco where drug overdose deaths are now there's more drug overdose deaths in San Francisco than there are COVID deaths. And so this mental health impact of our decisions. And now we have this study that says school choice reduces teen suicide. So why aren't we just going full bore on school choice now?
I have the answer.
Well, we should be. Go ahead.
The answer is something called teachers' unions. And pure and simple, the teachers' unions have all the money. And despite the recent, you know, in California, when they changed the way teachers' unions could take money from people constitutionally in the U.S., when that to where people had to opt in rather than opt out of union dues, especially the part of those dues that pays for political activity. And we all know that all of the teachers' dues should really be seen as political activity, because all the union does is coerce more money out of the local government constantly. And it's like, I don't know, having the workers who are producing cars decide on the rules for car safety and car mileage and car everything else. But the reason we don't have school choice is because if we had school choice, then all of these teachers would be unemployed, and you can't have that because they wouldn't have jobs. And
well, to be fair, they wouldn't all be unemployed, but they would all have to work with their money. They would have to compete equitably in a marketplace, just like your supermarkets have to compete with other supermarkets, just like commodity producers. You know, if you grow apples, you have to compete with other apple growers. If you're a manufacturer of whatever it is, you have to compete with other manufacturers. If you're Sears, you have to compete with Amazon.
Nobody,
and
because
Walmart.
Sears out of business now. I just thought.
Well, okay, yeah, which is, you know, what happens when you don't compete properly.
Yeah.
And the public schools would be out of business if they had to compete on a level playing field, because they are not offering a product or a service that consumers would willingly pay for. The only reason we have kids going to public schools is because they have no choice, and literally no choice. You're truant if you don't go. So it's essentially a prison system for our youth that is used to indoctrinate them. It's antithetical to liberty. It's antithetical to free thought. It's antithetical to economic growth. It's antithetical to a stable and happy society.
Go
go ahead. Well, I was going to say that the study talked about getting away from your bullies, but if the system itself is your bully, like for me, it wasn't a bully. I didn't have trouble in school because of the system was wrong. Sending me into a school with 1,000 other kids as someone who had an anxiety disorder was fundamentally just sending me into the wrong environment. And when you force kids into a one size fits none environment, like John likes to say,
program. One size fits none.
We end up hurting the very children we went around and we say we do this for the children, but we don't do it for the children. We do it for the system. And
we do it for,
and that's
absolutely.
the sad part.
And the whole, the news, and it would be even more filled with it if it wasn't one side toward the socialists. The news is literally filled with the facts that students are being pulled from public schools whenever it is possible. Whenever their parents have the means, they put them in private schools. And I think in the state of California, upwards of 50% of public school teachers have their children, their own children, in private schools. These are poor teachers who've somehow found a way to pay the $7,000 to $17,000 a year it costs to put your kids in a private school. And so, the facts are there that when you talk about bullying and suicide, because of the self-written rules that the public schools don't want to lose students because they're paid on head count. So they don't like to discipline students, despite students beating each other up and bullying and all the rest of that. They say there's like no strikes on this, and if somebody's physically bullying or bullying is all over the place, but they don't. They keep people in the classroom because that's how they get paid. Whereas when you're in a private school and you try that crap, you're out. The private school is more than willing to give up the money to create a safe environment where people can actually learn. And I know
because they have people who are competing to get into the private school. There is a demand there that doesn't exist for the public school systems, which are essentially drafting people to come to school.
Well, not to mention all the other kids who will leave if that one student's too disruptive. If that one student's disruptive, you've got 10 who will leave. So you're far better off kicking that one out, getting rid of that one.
But under present school systems, they can't. And time and again, and I think it's worth repeating every single time this subject comes up, the people who are most in favor of school choice, voucher program, some kind of tax relief so that they can put their kids in private schools, are poor people, not rich people. They are people in, we could call it the barrio, the ghetto. They are low-income folks who send their kids off to these prison camps where they're bullied, where they learn about drugs, where they fall in with bad company. And if there was any possible way for them to legally pull their kids out, and these are typically either single-family households or households where both parents work. So, they're not in a position where they can put their children in pods or homeschool them. And many times they don't have the education themselves as parents to provide the support that their children need to be homeschooled. If they did, they would do so. And there's all sorts of, our tax dollars are being spent hand over fist to provide internet service and laptops or Surface or whatever like that, so these kids can learn at a distance, but the environment they're trying to learn from is horrible. So vouchers, tax rebates, whatever, let's give poor parents who want their kids to have a better life than they have the means to force these public schools to compete, because if they have to compete, we know this, they will provide a better product. Right now, they simply provide propaganda. They talk about things like cisgen and socialism, and it's basically propaganda and a way for people to earn a very nice living in retirement on public teacher retirement benefits and pensions. So,
and working 9, 10 months a year. It's a sweet deal for the unions. It's not for the students. And we have private school for rich kids. No problem. Private, rich kids go to either private schools or they segregate by high real estate tax zip codes, so that the public schools in rich enclaves are also good and also heavily subsidized by their local communities. In the poorer communities, there's a crying need for equal access to quality education, which you can only get by making it non-mandatory and making it possible for private schools to compete on an equal basis.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of end that one on with when it comes to schools, we changed the relationship between the educated and the educators when we made schools mandatory. That no longer became a thing where they had to convince people to come to school. People now had to come to school under threat, and that simply changed the whole relationship between the educator and the educatee. And that's been a disaster. It just simply has been a disaster. Speaking of disasters and complete lack of self-awareness, Facebook accused Apple of using its power to harm developers and consumers and welcomed draft laws outlined by this new European Commission on
regulate us, please.
Yeah.
Well, that's the pot calling the kettle black. Snow calling Weiss right. I don't know what you want to say, but basically until the new iOSs that Apple had that forced people to opt in to all the insidious behind the curtain magic that Facebook's doing in Google to provide information to its advertisers to track people, because that's how they make money, is by selling information. There was no problem with Apple, but now that Apple's not preventing people from letting Facebook or Google track people. They're just simply putting the power in the hands of the people that have the latest iOS on their phone or their laptop or whatever. And that's why Facebook's upset. No, they're not. It doesn't harm developers. Apple invites, yes, in the past, Apple liked to keep everything in-house, but they figured that when they opened up their systems to developers, they made a heck of a lot more money because people could make more apps and programs for them. Apple has no problem at all with developers. What Apple has a problem with is Facebook hiding all the things it hides and not bothering to tell people about it, and Google hiding it. So it's ludicrous. And the idea that a government agency, shall we call another layer of the deep state, is now going to regulate this just frightens me to death, because what's going to happen is they're going to have a backdoor to everything. They're going to insist that in order to make sure that there's a fair and level playing field, that they have access to basically at the machine language level to all of the stuff that by law they shouldn't have access to. You watch, when this thing passes, there's going to be a little codicil in it that says that the government has access to all this stuff that they're preventing private enterprise from doing. I do business with some European organizations and have European news links, and even before this upcoming thing, I've had to actually go in every single time when I go to a new website. It says, "Hello, we would like to do this, this, and this. What would you like us to follow?" Well, there are some things, cookies, that we have to actually have to make the platform function, but we're not going to track you or gather information or any way. You can choose. You need to opt in. So fine and dandy. But when this thing comes out, it's going to be intrusive Big Brother that will, I guarantee you, have a backdoor into stuff that we don't want them having a backdoor into. So it's horrible.
Yeah, and then this also relates to the Section 230 repeal cheerleaders, which are coming from both the right and the left, and it's really coming from people who want to control the flow of information. They want to make sure that nothing except what is government-approved propaganda ever sees the light of day. I remember back in the dark ages when the Clintons were actually in office. I remember Hillary Clinton lamenting that with the rise of the internet, namely Drudge Report, and the whole Monica Lewinsky affair. I remember Hillary complaining that back when it was ABC, NBC, CBS, the New York Times, and Washington Post controlled essentially all of media, what was disseminated by the media, effectively, she had what she liked, which was gatekeepers. And she hated the fact that there were no gatekeepers for Drudge, no gatekeepers for the internet. And Section 230 says that the the internet is a platform, not a publisher. And as a platform, theoretically, everything goes. But because the politicians are really getting angry whenever their dirty deeds are uncovered, whether it's Hunter Biden or whether it's Donald Trump, doesn't make any difference. Whenever the misdeeds of the politicians and the cronies are uncovered by independent media, the bipartisan support for ending, for calling platforms publishers and thereby censoring them goes into full scale. And that's why you've got both Google and Facebook trying to censor what goes on their platforms. They're doing it as a defensive measure, trying to keep their business model alive. It's unfortunate that they have to do that, but that's what's going on.
Well, and they did a stunningly good job of all of the lamestream media in mass did a stunningly good job of stepping on any anti-Biden stories that were out there and promulgating any will-o'-the-wisp rumor that was anti-Trump during the last election cycle. And there's still these talking heads for the Clinton News Network and the rest of the lamestream media are still speaking about the Russian connection and Russian connivance and not reporting the news that this was basically an attempted strike by the center of the Democratic establishment to try to throw rumors out there to hurt Trump's election campaign. That never gets discussed. They're still bringing up this misinformation
you
as
mentioned
if it was knowledge. Yeah,
you mentioned the whole Russia conspiracy or the Russia allegations of for the last 4 years, and it's interesting that somebody was able to worm their way into all of the or a whole lot of federal agencies, Homeland Security, Department of Interior, I forget. Anyway, a bunch of agencies, and Energy, Department of Energy, and immediately we're blaming it on the Russians, or the media is blaming it on the Russians. I have not seen anything that directly links all of this espionage to the Russians. It may very well be the Russians, but it's really interesting how that's the first go-to. It's like there's a coming under the bed back in the 50s kind of.
Well, you notice that what they're not saying is that it's the Chinese, because for some reason the Chinese are semi-untouchable, even though in their switching gear for telecom, they planted in a couple of their major manufacturers planted little back doors so that they could have access to basically all communications anywhere that travels over a smart device. And it was discovered. And yet the go-to is not the Chinese, who have, I don't know, probably 20 times the number of programmers in that country, the number of people who can write code that the Soviet Union does. So why aren't we hearing about the Chinese? It's because the Chinese aren't the bogeyman they should be.
Well, I don't know that either of them should be the bogeyman. I mean, why do we have a Department of Homeland Security? Why do we have a Department of Energy?
I agree with all of that.
All of that. If you didn't have all of these superfluous agencies, you wouldn't have to worry about them getting bugged.
Well,
well, let's point out that the Chinese were just brought up that Eric Swalwell had intimate relations with a Chinese spy, and that there's well-known information that the Chinese have infiltrated all levels of our government. It's actually not even all that unknown. The story just came out a couple months ago, but of course it all gets swept under the rug. And from someone who used to play on the outside of hacker circles, shall we say, if a hack obviously looks like it came from someplace, you can almost pretty much guarantee that's not where it came from. Because anybody who is smart enough to pull off this kind of hack is smart enough to make it obviously look like it came from somewhere else. That's what hackers do. They cover their tracks.
I didn't know that you had hacking abilities, James.
Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I was a young man during the times when the internet and all this stuff came up. We programmed in BASIC in my days. So this tells you how old we are. So I can't program a a thing to get out of a paper bag. So these days, but back in the day when I was a young man and I had interest in that kind of thing, I knew how to. I played in the circles, but we don't. You look at this stuff and you're going, if it's obvious it came from someplace, it didn't come from that place. It came from somewhere else, and that's just how these things work.
I want to do a quick tag on to what Richard said. It might be part of an upcoming novel, that threats make for job security. Terrorists make for Department of Homeland Security. Fights over internet freedom make for government agencies and government reports and think tanks and all the rest of the stuff. So, if there's a threat of terror, and a constant threat of terror that can be pulled out of the closet and waved as a flag, it allows the government to step on more of our freedoms, or maybe the government to have all these agencies with a lot of people for it, and B, the government to take away more of our freedoms. And that's exactly what's happening on a worldwide scale with the internet right now. It's
a lot of bloody shirts being waved around.
Oh yeah, lots and lots. So let's hope they're not successful in it, because if they take away the platform's definition as a platform and turn them into publishers, we're going to have even more hell to pay than we have already.
Yeah, well, they do a lot of this stuff in the name of the common good, but when I look at history, and the common good is the excuse used for much of human tragedy. You can go back through all of the mass human tragedy, and they were all started because it's for the common good. So the commons is a strange place, and if you aren't very careful about what you determine is the common good, then we all have to be very careful. And this is our Christmas show. And do any of you two have a Christmas wish for our viewers and for Access Sacramento? Here, we got a minute left.
I've got a Christmas wish. I wish that 2020 would be over.
That's a simple wish.
I wish that the panic-demic, that here's what I wish: that all the government overreach that has happened, and once the government grabs power, you have to basically put a bullet in the back of their head to get them to give it up. They're not going to give it up. I wish that on January 1, all of this overreach would end, or at least sometime during 2021. I'm sure it won't, but I hope that the battle in 2021 and going forward to take back all the freedoms that we've lost in 2020 is less bloody and less painful than it might be. That's my Christmas hope. Oh, and today is my high holy day. It's winter solstice. So happy winter solstice to all you pagans out there.
And my Christmas wish is that for everybody to get a chance to spend some time close with your friends and family as soon as we possibly can. And I think these days have been a trial for everybody. And I want to thank all of you for watching. Thank Access Sacramento for having us on. I want to thank everybody for giving me this opportunity to play host on this show. And that is all the time we have. Thank you for watching, and good night.
Merry Christmas, everybody, and thank you so much. Appreciate it.